All right, today we are going to unpack an idea that is so deeply embedded in our world, we almost never think to question it: private land ownership. But where did this whole concept actually come from? And is it really as natural as it feels?
I mean, have you ever really stopped to think about this? It's a real puzzle, right? How is it possible that one person can own a huge piece of land they will never, ever set foot on, while someone else who lives and works on land their whole life has zero claim to it? Yeah, that's not some law of nature. It's a system of rules that we as people built. And today, we're going to trace that blueprint all the way back to the beginning. So where do we start? Well, like with so many of our big legal ideas in the West, we've got to go all the way back to ancient Rome. This is where the foundation, the actual blueprint for our modern idea of property, was first written down into law. And boy, did it last.
The Romans gave us this incredibly powerful concept, and they called it dominium. And what's so wild is just how modern this ancient idea feels. Dominium wasn't just about having the right to use something. No, it defined private property as a near absolute right of total and utter control. So what did this total control actually mean? Well, you could use the land, obviously, but the big one, you had the right to exclude other people from it, to put up a fence and say, "This is mine." You could sell it, you could lease it out to someone else, and, this is so important, you could pass it down to your kids forever. This whole bundle of rights, it became the absolute backbone of property law as we know it. Okay, so you've got the legal rules, but that's not enough, right? For an idea like absolute ownership to really stick, people have to believe it's morally right. Society needed a justification, a kind of moral permission slip for one person to own way, way more land than they could ever possibly use themselves. And the justifications really came from two major thinkers, Thomas Aquinas and John Locke. Aquinas argued that, look, private property is a good thing because it encourages people to take care of things, good stewardship, and that creates social order. Then, centuries later, John Locke comes along and reframes the whole thing. He calls it a natural right. And his big idea was super simple. When you mix your labor with something in nature, like say you farm a field, that piece of nature becomes yours. But, and this is the part that almost always gets forgotten, there was some serious fine print in Locke's theory. He put in this really important condition, what's known as the Lockean proviso. He said, sure, you can take land for yourself, but only if you leave enough and as good for everybody else. It was this built-in moral break on just grabbing everything you could. So you've got these two powerful ideas, but they both have these moral guardrails, right? The duty to be a good steward and the duty to leave enough for others. But then, a couple of major historical shifts happened that basically threw the whole system into overdrive and smashed right through those guardrails. And that brings us to this whole new chapter, a time when those moral checks and balances just started to, well, evaporate, and the idea of accumulating as much as you possibly can became king. Now, this didn't happen all at once, not at all. It was this slow, creeping change over centuries. You know, under feudalism, owning land meant you had obligations to people. Then, over time, it just became a commodity, a thing you could buy and sell. Then, colonial expansion happened, and suddenly the world seemed like it had an infinite frontier. And finally, with industrial capitalism, land basically becomes just another number on a spreadsheet, a financial asset. So what really kicked this into high gear? Two big things. First up, money. Locke himself argued that, hey, money doesn't spoil like crops do, so it's okay to accumulate as much of it as you want. And that became a justification for accumulating the land that generates that money. The second game changer was colonial expansion. In a world that seemed to have endless, empty land, that old rule about leaving enough and as good for others, it started to sound kind of quaint, totally irrelevant. And all of this history, it leads us right here, to today. And this is where things get kind of awkward, because those old justifications start to really clash with the world we actually live in, creating some really deep contradictions in the system we have now. So let's take Locke's idea. His whole natural right to property thing was based on you being able to go out and mix your labor with unowned land. But what happens when there is no unowned land? When every single square inch of the planet is already claimed, how can that natural right possibly exist for someone who was born with nothing? And what about that stewardship argument from Aquinas? If private property is justified because it encourages responsibility and taking care of things, then how on earth does our system of inheritance make any sense? It just assumes that someone who's born into a wealthy landowning family is automatically going to be a good steward, without any test of their skill, their character, or their commitment to anyone else. So, with these massive contradictions, how did modern societies deal with it? Well, they pulled off a very clever trick. The system quietly shifted the promise. It was no longer about guaranteeing everyone equal access to land. Instead, it became about guaranteeing everyone equal access to the market. The new argument was, hey, you might not have a right to any land, but you have the freedom to go sell your labor to someone who does. And that's the thing you absolutely have to remember here. Our system of land ownership, it's not a law of physics. It's a set of rules we came up with. And because we invented them, guess what? We can also rethink them. So let's just explore a couple of different ways to approach this.
So here, you can really see three totally different philosophies. Our current system, it's all about stability. It's designed to lock in private ownership forever. Then you've got something like a land value tax system, which is really focused on fairness, trying to reclaim the value that the community creates. And finally, a leasehold system, which puts equality front and center, starting with the idea that land belongs to all of us.
The thinking behind a land value tax is actually pretty straightforward. A piece of land gets valuable because of what the community builds around it, right? The roads, the schools, the parks, that's community-created value. So the tax just takes a slice of that value back for the community. The cool side effect is that it encourages people to actually use their land productively, not just sit on it and wait for it to get more valuable. Okay, now for an even bigger shift in thinking, a leasehold system. And look, this isn't just a theory. It's how successful places like Singapore actually work. The basic idea is the community or the state owns all the land itself. And then people, you or a company, you lease the right to use that land for a really long time, say 99 years. So you might own your house, but you're renting the ground it sits on.
Now, an idea like this, it has some pretty obvious pros and cons. On the plus side, you can't have these landowning dynasties that last forever. And it creates a kind of fairness between generations since the land eventually comes back to the community. But the downsides are huge, too. You could have a lot of political drama when leases come up for renewal, and you need incredibly strong, trustworthy, and non-corrupt institutions to manage the whole thing.
And really, this is what it all boils down to. The debate isn't about which system is more logical. I mean, they're all logical in their own way. The real fight here is a fight over values. What do we care about most? Is it the stability that comes with owning something forever? Is it the fairness of making sure everyone benefits from rising land values? Or is it the fundamental equality of saying land belongs to all of us? You can't have a perfect score on all three at once.
And that's the idea I want to leave you with. Owning land isn't like gravity. It's not a fact of nature. It is a choice we made as a society, and a choice we continue to make every day. So the question for us today isn't whether we can rethink that choice. The real question is, what values should guide us when we do?